Hello everyone, and welcome to the explanation of the modal verbs, which is the third chapter from our curriculum in year 2. In this chapter, I will explain the modal verbs, the idiomatic expressions related to the modal verbs, and I will end up with the changing of the direct speech into indirect speech when you have a modal verb in the direct speech. Starting with the modal verbs, it's evident or it's taken for granted that there are 10 modal verbs in English. The ones that we will cover today are can, could, may, might, shall, should, ought, will, and would. Usually the verb that follows the modal verb is in the simple form, and this is always the case even if the tense of the sentence is in the past or in the future. Starting with the can and could, there are 4 meanings that can be expressed by can or could sometimes. We can express ability, we can express possibility, opportunity, and permission. If we want to talk about ability, present ability can either be affirmative or negative, of course. Here we use can because you are talking about your ability at the present time. For example, Ali can read without glasses. However, if you want to talk about your past ability, and of course this can be either in the negative or positive form, you use could here instead. For instance, and usually this past ability indicates either uh, uh, when you used to have ability and you don't use it anymore, you don't have it anymore, or when you didn't have the ability and you have it now. For instance, Suha couldn't do her responsibilities when she first employed. Usually you need to pay attention, students, that you insert time expression to indicate that, for instance, when a person was 10 years old, or when a person was at a young age, or at an earlier stage of your study, earlier stage of your employment, for instance, just in order to show that something used to happen at a specific time. The second meaning, which is, I don't think that we have problem with the ability. We start to have a more difficult part in the in code or can. We have the possibility, which we need to pay very much attention to. And possibility, it can be of 3 types. It's either a future possibility, and here you talk about you use can or could. For instance, when you tell somebody that the doctor can see me at 21:20, so it means that it's possible for the doctor to see you at 9:20. As to present and the future, impossibility this time. So here, Dad could be driving if he didn't make an accident. We usually insert the if clause in order to show that if it were not for this action or if it were not for this event, something else would have happened. And we always need to be very careful in the tense of the sentence. And by the way, like I said, this impossibility can either be about the present or future, and we use could only. As to past impossibility, and this is past impossibility is inferred that, that you did use, or it's implied from the sentence or from the situation. It consists of couldn't in the negative form, because if you put it in the affirmative form, it will mean something else, which is opportunity, as we will see shortly. So it consists of couldn't plus have and the past participle form of the verb. For instance, the surgeon couldn't have attended the meeting because maybe he has another commitment. We don't know. And as we said, that this is impossibility is in the past. As to the third meaning, which is opportunity, Here, I don't think that we've got a big problem with opportunity because past opportunity, which is not realized, consists of could plus have and the past participle form of the verb. And here we do, for instance, if you have a time and you didn't make use of your time, you were supposed to do this thing instead of watching TV, for instance, you could have done your homework. You could have, for instance, attended online meeting instead of being on social media. So you had the chance to do something, but you didn't make use of your time. Therefore, we use the could in the affirmative form. You just need to distinguish between the negative usage of could or the positive usage of could. The next one is the past opportunity which is realized. Here we don't need to use any modal verb, and you can say John was able to write an article or John was able to do his homework. The next one is permission. Permission can either be in the present or in the future, and you use here can or may. We'll talk about the expressing permission using may a few slides from now, but our focus now is on can to give a permission. For instance, you can borrow my notebook if you need it. You can leave the class earlier. You can have a swimming lesson, for instance, if you want to. If you want to express past permission, here you'll use could instead. My daughter could skip some of her homework. However, students, just like ability, you need to give time expression to show that this permission used to be given, but maybe it's not granted anymore. So always pay attention to the time expression and the necessity of inserting it. Now let's move to the second group of the modal verbs, which includes will and would. We used to say that, by the way, would is not always or could or may and might. These forms are not the past tense of these modal verbs. They are the past form of the modal verbs. So just bear in mind about this. For will and would, we've got four meanings: either to give a promise, or to talk about future activity, to request something, or to indicate or express contrary to fact. As to promise, sometimes you use will to talk about your future plan, to promise somebody to do something, or to agree with somebody, for instance, to meet somewhere else or to make an arrangement with somebody else. And you are using will here. I will be there in time. For instance, I will cook chicken for dinner, or I'll see you at the cafeteria. This is for promise. As to future activity, here you need to pay attention because you are using will, not would. And there are two types of a future activity: either a continuing future activity, the structure is will plus be and the ing, and this is the I think you studied this. It's the future continuous. Next year, Sami will be studying in the UK. So in the next year, he will be doing his studies. It will be continuous in the future. However, when you talk about the completion of a future activity, it's going to be in the future perfect, and it consists of will plus have and the past participle of the verb. When we talked about the future perfect, we said that this is an action which will be finished at a certain time in the future. By noon, the children will have changed their clothes. So, maybe now the children haven't changed their clothes yet, but by noon they will have finished. They will have, for example, had a shower and changed their clothes. Now let's move to request. Usually, we use will or would to make a polite request or to soften our request, to make it milder, for instance, Will you pass me the salt, please? Or will you please pass me the salt? Here, again, we have two types of request. These requests can be immediate, I mean, the instant time of speaking, or it can be a distant future. Again, you need to insert time expression. Will you please close the door when you come? So that's why it's very essential to add the time expression to show that this request is not at the same moment of speaking. It might be at another point or uh, another time. As to contrary to fact usually comes with the if clause, and it is of two types, either in the present or the past. The present contrary to fact statement, by the way, we use would in the two cases, but the present contrary to fact statement, it is the second condition in the if clause. If Sally didn't break her leg, she would go to Paris. You remember that with the if clause, that you have the past here in the first part of the if clause, and you have would plus the simple form of the verb in the second part of the if clause. As to the past contrary to fact contrary to fact statement, this is the third condition of the if clause, and you usually have the past perfect in the first part, and you have would have and the past participle form of the verb in the second part of the if clause. If Sally hadn't broken her leg, she would have gone to Paris. Okay? I don't think we've got a big problem with the contrary to fact, because if you mastered the if clauses, you don't have any problem here. So that's all for will and would. Let's move to the next group of the modal verbs, which is shall, should, and ought. You usually use to and the infinitive form of the verb when you have ought. But if you have shall and should, you just have the simple form of the verb after shall and should. But ought is the only one that needs to after it. Fine. There are four meanings that can be expressed with shall, should, and ought. And by the way, you don't use all of them in these four meanings. We'll see now that you have either shall and should to express advisability. This advisability, we see that they are of three types. The first one, either affirmative question of advisability, negative question of advisability, and the statement of advisability. So, the affirmative question of advisability, you just ask somebody if you will do something with them. Shall I pay in dollar? Shall I see you, for instance, in the cafeteria? You're just asking somebody if something is acceptable or agreed upon. As to the negative question of advisability, here we don't use shall, we use shouldn't. Shouldn't you be serving your country? It means as if you are, I think we talked about this, just like when you are telling somebody that, isn't it better to do this instead of this? So yeah, as if you are advising somebody in the negative form. And by the way, this can also be in the present, when we say shouldn't you be serving your country, or in the past, and you have shouldn't the government have made the amendments. In the past, I have always told you that we use have and the past participle form of the verb after the modal verb when you are indicating that this meaning is in the past. As to statement of advisability, Kathy should see a doctor. Kathy, this is when you are intending to tell that somebody needs to do this urgently because it's for the benefit of the listener. Therefore, it's not an obligation, by the way. This is, like I said, it's for their health or for their benefit. Now we have obligations when you are obliging somebody to do something, and you use here either should or ought to. We don't have shall here anymore, but you have either unfulfilled obligations, and unfulfilled obligation in turn are divided into two types, which can either be in the present or in the past. I should be reading my assignment, or I should have been reading my assignment. Okay, and you see that this is present continuous in the first one, and present perfect continuous in the second one. As to the past obligation, I should have read my assignment. Instead, for instance, something in the past, you wasted your time, like when we said with the can or could, and you were supposed to read your assignment instead of wasting your time. The next one is fulfilled obligation. Fulfilled obligation, whether it's at the present time or in the past time, you don't need to use any modal verb. You just use was obliged to. Okay, just like was able to or was permitted to, we are using was obliged to for fulfilled obligations. So it's only unfulfilled obligations that you use the modal verbs with. The third meaning with the shall or should or ought is expectation. Now you are expecting something to happen. The movie should be released soon. Or she is clever, she ought to do well. Because you are building high expectation on somebody, so you are quite certain that this thing should happen. Okay? And I think the example that we given, that when you are leaving or you are going out late outside your house, the shops should be closed now. The next one is chance. Chance is kind of similar to if clause, but we are not using if here, we are using should. Just like when we say, if you travel, don't forget to get me a present. Or should you travel abroad, don't come back. Or should you, by the way, it doesn't have to be, the second part of the sentence doesn't have to be in the negative form. Like when I say, should you go to Paris, make sure you get me a souvenir. Or should you go to the uni, just take your coat with you. If you do this, make sure you do this, or if you do this, don't forget to do this. Okay. Let's move now to the next part, which is may and might. May and might are sort of easier than the other ones, because we've got only the meaning of permission and conjecture. For permission, either a permission given in the present or future, or past permission. Present or future permissions are used, we use may. You may start your lesson soon, just like with can when we mentioned earlier. Or past permission, you are not using any modal verb. You had the permission to leave. We don't use might. You might leave. As soon as you use might, this will change you into a conjecture. Okay, students? So just stick to no usage of any modal verb with the past permission. As to conjecture, okay, we have how many types of conjectures? We've got 4 types of conjectures. Either conjectures about the present situation or a current situation, and here we use may or might. You may need glasses. You may need to move to another house, or you may need to make a surgery. About an activity, this is going to be in the progressive form. either may or might plus the ing form of the verb. She might be studying. By the way, you cannot use the ing form of the verb straight away after may or might, but you have to insert be after the modal verb. Why? Because always the modal verb is followed by a simple form of the and here be has to come back to its basic form, which is be. She might be studying now. My daughter must be sleeping now. My students must be, for example, might be writing their homework, for instance. As to future conjecture, again, you are using either may or might. My dad may not accept that when he knows. You notice that you didn't make that much change or that much difference from the first conjecture, which is the present situation. My only difference is the time expression that I inserted to indicate that this conjecture is about future. Again, now we are moving or talking about the past conjecture, which consists of may or might plus have and the past participle form of the verb. I might have lost my notebook in the car. Okay, like the other modal verbs, if you want to indicate the past, use the have and the past participle after the modal verb. After may and might, I'm moving now to must. There are four meanings expressed by must: either necessity, abstention, lack of necessity, and deduction. For necessity is kind of different from should, when you have an obligation to do something. No, here we are expressing what is necessarily to be done. Okay, and in necessity we have four types. We have present necessity, future necessity, all-time necessity, which applies at any time, just like the nature of human beings or a scientific fact. And next we have the past necessity. As to present necessity, the lecture must begin now. The time expression now indicates that this is something at the present time. And when you say Mona must leave at 6, again, the time expression shows that this is a future active necessity. As to all-time necessity, students must prepare for their assignment. It talks about something in general. Or usually, for instance, when you say you must have healthy food if you want to be, uh, you must consume healthy food, for instance, just like in order to be fit all the time, just like to have something which applies at any time. Well, and the past necessity, we don't use any modal verb. We are using the had to. Jane had to leave the class early, which means that it was necessary for her to leave the class in advance. The negative form of must, mustn't, or must not, here it will change the meaning into abstention, just like when you are preventing somebody or telling somebody not to do something. We must not neglect our health. We must not write on the wall. We must not play in the street. Just like when you are telling somebody that this is not allowed or this is not good to be done. To lack of necessity, and by the way, it's always this context of the situation which plays a role. When we were doing the exercises, some students were getting confused whether we use don't have to show the lack of necessity or to use abstention, mustn't. For instance, do your homework. Some students said you don't have to do your homework. and other people say you mustn't do your homework, or some students were saying you must do your homework. Okay, like I said, the intention of the speaker or the context of situation always determines whether you are using lack of necessity. For instance, you don't have to do your homework on the weekend. This indicates that it's not something which is necessarily to be done on the weekends. Or you say you must do your homework in time. The completion of the sentence changes the meaning expressed by must. So yeah, I was saying that lack of necessity is something which is not uh, very essential to be done. The last meaning expressed by must is deduction. Deductions can be about present. He must be, for example, reading now, or she must be studying now. About the future, it must be going to rain. Or deductions about the past, he must have been, for example, meeting another girl. You can also use deductions without been. He must have met another girl to show that this is a deduction in the past, but not in a progressive form. After must, we are having, uh, after talking about the modal verbs. Let's move now to the related words and idioms in the that involve the modal verbs. These idiomatic expressions, we have can't help, and the past of can't help is couldn't help. We have would like, again we have would like but in a different meaning, and we have would rather, we have maybe, we have willing, and had better. With can't help, it means that you cannot resist or you cannot stop doing something. The structure of can't help or of the sentence that involves can't help usually is a verb with the ing form, or it has it. Like when we say, I can't help seeing poor people suffering. It's always the verb in the ing form, or you can substitute this whole phrase with help it. I can't help it. The second one is would like. Would you like a cup of tea? Or would you like to come to our party? It's followed by infinitive. And when I say infinitive, it's to with the simple past of the simple form of the verb. So would you like to play football? It's just like when you are inviting somebody to do something and you are addressing somebody else. The other type of would like, which is an order, when you are asking somebody else to do a service, or when you are requesting somebody else to do something for you. Again, it's followed by an infinitive, which is to and the simple form of the verb, and it has I would like to see the menu, please. I would like to stay in this room, please. Just like when you are expressing your desire. We need to pay very good attention to the distinction between the first would like and this would like, because it's always, again, the meaning or the context which indicate whether you are requesting or inviting somebody else to do for something with you, to do something with you. The next one is would rather. Would rather shows your preferences or somebody else's preference, and it's always followed by the simple form of the verb. I would rather study or stay with my kids during the weekends. Sometimes you can mention another alternative thing that you don't prefer, and sometimes you don't have to. It's always the completion of the sentence can be essential or not, depending on the situation. For maybe, maybe means perhaps, and it's also it doesn't determine or um, uh, doesn't require a particular form or a particular tense. But why? Because it's an adverb, and you are usually separating it uh, separated from the rest of the sentence using a comma, and in this case doesn't affect or the structure of the sentence doesn't affect it, or it doesn't affect the structure of the sentence. Maybe Ali is arriving next week. Now we are having willing. Willing is to show your readiness to do something. For instance, and by the way, it is followed by the infinitive. Uh, the teacher is willing to repeat the test. So, to and the simple form of the verb. Had better. When you are advising somebody to do something, you would better consult a doctor regarding your health. This is a suggestion, but in an advisable way, and had better is followed by the simple form of the verb. Now let's move to the this is about the structure, and in questions the auxiliary is moved before the subject, and would rather is comparative followed by than. So to the reported speech with modals, if you want to change the direct speech into indirect speech, and your direct speech includes a modal verb, you are always changing your modal verb into the past form. For example, can is changed into could. The clerk said the doctor can see you at 11. The clerk said that the doctor could see me at 11. We always say that in the reported speech, we are moving one tense back. Will is changed into would. Mary said, I will attend the lecture tomorrow. Mary said that she would attend the lecture tomorrow. Shall is changed into should. However, should, if you have should in the direct speech, it remains should in the indirect speech as well. Ahmed thought I should be reading my assignment. Ahmed thought that he should be reading his assignment. For ought, it remains as it is, just like should. For may, you can change it to might, or you need to change it to might. The lecturer said you may leave at 7:30, and the lecturer said that we might leave at 7:30. As to must, you either keep it as it is. My dad said I must have my eyes examined. My dad said that he must have his eyes examined, or he had to. You just change it into the past, which is had to, the past necessity. Hereby I arrive at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time talking about directions, suggestions, and order of modifiers.